Rāhui Kātene.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the facts that really stood out in the corrections post-election briefing to the Minister was the fact that the majority of offenders have histories of addiction and substance abuse, which have typically contributed to their offending. The statistic which said it all was that a massive 90% of inmates fall into this category. 9 out of every 10 prisoners have a history of drug and alcohol abuse. What we know too is that if these same inmates don't receive treatment while in prison, there is an impossibly high chance that upon release, their addiction will lead to criminal behaviour, which leads the offenders right back through the prison gates. It is a vicious cycle in which the revolving prison door places a relentless pressure on the economy, a heavy burden on society. What we are talking about is not just the 7,900 inmates who currently occupy our prisons. We are talking about the children, the partners, the parents of these inmates. We are talking about the 29,000 staff who work in the justice sector. And if the forecasting is right, the pressures on prison capacity will get even worse with the projected increase to 10,700 by 2016. This is population growth that nobody welcomes. The impetus then is to get it right is incredibly important. This bill is a step in the right direction. The Maori Party fully supports the intention to improve the operations of the corrections system, to move with the times, and to respond to some of the technological advances that challenge the sector. Our overriding caution, however, is that the amendments in this bill will certainly allow a clean sweep of the system, but what we worry about is the amount of dirt still swept under the mat. And by dirt, I'm referring to the rubbish that is smuggled in by loved ones and staff, the substances that addle minds, hype up the paranoia, add fuel to an explosive temper, become the key ingredient for conflict and dispute. The vital need to address drug and alcohol abuse has been swept under the carpet while we deal to search, detention and detection and offence provisions. It's a bit like the perennial problem of governments who become fixated on building prisons rather than investing in solutions. The new Minister of Corrections has been confronted with the fact that the downstream effects of Labour's policies have created a massive demand spiralling up to 2,200 more beds, the equivalent of 4 new prisons. The taxpayer is counting the cost of a prison system which continues to breed failure by building jails and incarcerating people and ignoring the critical issues and systemic failure that leads to criminal offending in the first place. But there is good news at hand. The Māori Party is delighted that our co-leader, Dr. Peter Sharples, has been appointed Associate Minister of Corrections. Dr. Sharples has spoken often in this House of his desire to enhance the mana of all people in society, and especially those caught up in the criminal justice system, by promoting a system based on restorative principles and less on adversarial principles. It is a principle which clearly this government has recognised as desperately needed in criminal justice system, which fails to invest in the restoration of relationships, ignores the imperative to inspire offenders to address the issues that led to offending. It is a principle also which the Ombudsman, Mel Smith, promoted in his inquiry into the criminal justice sector in 2007. In his report he concluded, and I quote, "I believe that statements from politicians are necessary which challenge the more imprisonment panacea. I am of the view that such statements will be heard with a great deal more sympathy than is superficially apparent, as my investigation leads me to conclude that there is much wider public support for and social acceptance of an approach to offenders based on humanity rather than retribution. Thank you, Minister, than is apparent from headlines. This is good news instead. It's the Ombudsman's fault for using that word. But this is good news. What he said is good news. It is debate well worth having. In their various contracts across the state sector, chief executives of government departments are required to contribute to public debate in their fields. We look forward to the chief executives of justice and corrections leading this debate about the things that really matter, the 3 R's: rehabilitation, restoration and reintegration. Mr Speaker, I have broadened our debate on this bill to ensure that we have a sharp focus on the whole operations of the corrections system, not just the various measures that are being introduced to incrementally improve the control of contraband in prisons. Make no mistakes, the heightened emphasis on operational measures to restrict contraband, to monitor prisoner mail and telephone calls, to disable and jam cell phones, and to increase information sharing to the police are all worthy goals. And we are particularly pleased that amongst the legislative measures is the understanding that the offence provisions will apply to all inmates and staff. The bill specifies a whole range of precise indicators. The additional search powers will now apply to the staff lockers and spaces. There are detection provisions regarding drug and alcohol testing. There are new offence provisions regarding sample tampering. There is a consistent standard that all mail can be read in order to determine whether there is grounds for it to be withheld. There is authority for the department to intercept, monitor, disable, disrupt and interfere with wireless transmission to prevent cell phone use. And the bill now enables information to be shared with the police and to be extended to relevant social agencies. These are all important means of achieving compliance with law reform to improve the operations of the corrections system. The smuggling of cell phones into prison has long been a problem. Having access to mobile technology ensures access to a means to organise criminal activity. Access to a mobile can also provide the opportunity for those on the inside to harass and threaten victims, witnesses or other members of the public on the outside. Furthermore, increasing the capacity to monitor prisoners' telephone calls increases the chance of being able to prevent illegal activities or the harassment of members of the public by inmates. It is of course noteworthy that the staff of prisons are to be included within the scope of this bill. We do of course recall that there have been unsubstantiated allegations of misconduct and corruption laid against staff in Rimataka prison in the last 2 years, and that many of those staff were Maori. Bearing this in mind, we will be watching carefully to see that these new provisions do not in fact escalate harassment of prison staff and Maori staff in particular. Finally, I return again to the dirt under the mat. The Department of Corrections administers a screening test of offenders at the pre-sentence stage. That test can be used to develop sentence plans, to refer inmates to appropriate services, including prison-based drug treatment units. Currently, there are enough treatment units for about 500 prisoners per year. That's a mere 6% of the total muster. We know that substance abuse treatment does make a difference in minimising criminal behaviour and reducing the recidivism rate. Treatment, if associated with community supervision and social support upon release, is even more likely to be successful. While we support this bill as a very positive move to ensure search, detection and offence provisions are introduced to improve the justice system, we cannot rest easy until a comprehensive approach is taken to address drug and alcohol abuse, to provide effective education and training opportunities, and to investing in success rather than systemic failure. Thank you.